Of there being many, many stars out there that are suns with worlds around them like we have, that was just totally foreign to them. They knew nothing about it. But what they did believe, and the concept that they did have, was that they were attempting to become like God, and that they were attempting, and that the promise was that they would inherit what God has, whatever God has to give, they can inherit it. Whatever God is doing, they can do. But they just didn't have any concept of this idea of there being an infinite universe of suns and worlds and things of that sort. And so, I really don't think that there is a divergence in Mormon thinking on this point. I think, and I have a few other statements, I think maybe I'll save them for another time, but there is a clear, strong, distinct teaching among the early Christians that men can become, they're not going to become part of some mystical essence. They are going to retain their personality and their individuality, but they're going to become like God and like their Father, and they're going to inherit from Him. They're going to reign and rule and judge and govern. But the concept of other worlds just simply was not a part of their thinking at that time. I don't think I would be embarrassed myself personally, coming from my Mormon background, to sit here and say every single thing that we believe on this point was believed by Origen or Tertullian. No progress has been made. No adding of line upon line, precept upon precept has taken place in 2,000 years on this particular point. So if we believe some things that go beyond what they believe, to me that's part of the whole Mormon concept.
Martin Towner.
Things like that is, I think most people on the face of the earth would say that Mormons are Christians. But I think if you went to most Christians and presented the beliefs of the Mormon Church, instead of saying these are Mormon beliefs, just say, this is what I believe, and then I don't think that most Christians would consider Mormons Christian. What I mean by that is, if you went to a Baptist or a Protestant or somebody like that and said, I believe that men can become gods, I don't think there's any Protestants that believe men can become gods, and so I don't think the Protestants would go with this on Mormons being Christian. I mean, I think the whole goal of the Mormon Church is so totally different than the whole goal of the Christian Church that they really are in two separate camps.
But you said that no Protestants believe some of the things that Mormons do. For example, you brought up the idea of deification or the idea of becoming like God. I would take issue with that. There are lots of Protestants who believe that very thing. Probably the most famous recently is C.S. Lewis, who has been quoted in his book The Weight of Glory and Other Addresses. That's a 1980 book by Macmillan. In there he says, it's a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest and most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you'd be strongly tempted to worship. Now, there are other people who are of similar minds who are Protestant in belief. Paul Crouch of the Trinity Broadcasting Network has said, quote, I'm a little God. I have His name. I am one with Him. I'm in a covenant relation.
Right, he's talking about a covenant. I know Paul Crouch. Okay. Personally, I've worked at TBN before.
Okay.
And he doesn't believe that when we get to heaven that we're gonna create a new world and people it and things like that. Paul Crouch doesn't believe that.
No, the only reason
I'm saying what he believes is because he's not here to defend himself. I mean,
understand. All I was doing was quoting him. I'm not trying to take him out of context, and I'm not trying to say that he believes what Mormons do, but in the sense that he's read it here, he said that I'm a little God. Now, if he's believing that he can become somehow like God, then I don't know that that's too different, at least in theme, from what Mormons believe. Robert Tilton, a Texas evangelist, has said the same kind of a thing. He said that man is a God kind of creature. Originally, you were designed to be as a god in this world. Man was designed or created by God to be the God of this world. Now, admittedly, that's very different from the Mormon concept, but it's similar. So if we're going to exclude someone because they have that sort of a belief, then we have to say, well, wait a minute, Paul Crouch and Robert Tilden are not Christians because they believe in deification, if you're going to say that Mormons are not Christians because they believe in deification. Do you see my point there?
I see the point you're making, but I mean, I think there's a lot of people called gods in the Bible that aren't referred to in a way that means they should be worshipped. I mean, Jesus spoke to the judges of his time and said that they're gods. I mean,
he did, and there's not one Mormon out there who has claimed that somehow they should be worshipped when they get to the next life. That's just not a part of Mormon doctrine.
And are you saying that if you create a new world and people it and everything like that, that the people on that world aren't supposed to worship you as a god?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm saying that that's something that has not been expressed in Mormon thought to the best of my knowledge at this point. But even if it were, should that exclude Mormons as Christians? I guess that's the question to ask today.
And the way I look at it is, so if you create a system that has more than one god, I don't believe that you can link yourself with the religion of that Bible and be true in doing that. And that's my belief. Well, the point I was trying to make when I first got on the call
would you consider Justin Martyr a Christian?
I'm not familiar with that person.
You're not familiar with Justin Martyr. He was one of the early church fathers. He was probably one of the most prominent in the 2nd century. Quoting Psalms 82, he said, I said ye are gods and are all children of the Most High. Thereby it is demonstrated that all men are deemed worthy of becoming gods and of having the power to become sons of the highest. Close quote. That's in his dialogue with Trypho from Roberts and Donaldson. There are similar statements. Are you familiar with Clement of Alexandria?
Sort of.
2nd century Christian, who said, not just a Christian, an early Christian church father, who said, quote, this knowledge, talking about the knowledge of the gospel, this knowledge leads them to the end, the endless, final end, teaching of the life that is to be ours, a life of conformity to God with gods, plural, when we have been freed from all punishment. So he believed that we could become gods. He went on and said, these people who have been saved, they have received the title of God since they are destined to be enthroned with other gods who are ranked next below the Savior, close quote. An early Christian church father, Irenaeus, another one in the 2nd century, one of the tops, said, quote, we are not made gods at our beginning, but first we were made men, then in the end gods, close quote. I mean, everybody considers Irenaeus and Justin and Clement of Alexandria to be Christians, and if Mormons have a similar thought process, even though not Orthodox today, I don't know that just on that basis we can say that Mormons are not Christians.
Well, I think that your doctrine of God either makes you a Christian or not a Christian. I mean,
all right. So then according to your definition, Clement is not a Christian, and Justin is not a Christian, and Athanasius is not a Christian.
Well, now see, my problem with what you've just said is you say that means that we can become gods, and that's what they meant. I don't know what they meant.
Well,
the reason I have a problem with that is because you quoted Paul Crouch, a guy I personally know, to try and say that he believes in that.
No, I didn't say that he had a belief like Mormons did. I said that he has a similar belief. Paul Crouch is quoted as saying, I am a little God. I have his name. I am one with him. That's it. That's all I'm saying about Paul Crouch.
Conformity with God is something different than being a God.
He said, I am a little God, period. I don't know what you take that to mean. I'm not sure what he meant by it, but I know that he said, I am a little God. In some sense, anyway, Paul Crouch believes that he's a God. Ask him about it sometime if you know him.
I know him, and okay. I don't know when I'm going to see him again, but I'd love to ask him about it.
Yeah, and once again,
if I thought he'd call back to this radio station, I'd have him. You know.
and once again, I'm not. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to take a position that he believes what LDS doctrine is. That's the furthest thing from my mind. But I am taking the position